Huygens recorded the sound while falling through Titan's atmosphere in 2005. At first, engineers blamed turbulence. Then, mechanical vibration. Then, telemetry drift. But every correction model failed the same way. Because buried underneath the static was a pulse that remained perfectly stable, while every explanation around it slowly collapsed. The first pulse sounds like wind. Static rolls across the recording as the probe drops through Titan's orange haze, more than 900 million miles from Earth. Then something pushes up beneath it, low, clean, evenly spaced. It happens once. Then again. Huygens recording sounds inside Titan's methane atmosphere. At first, nobody reacts to it. A descent probe falling through turbulence should hear unstable noise anyway. Random movement, random sound. But the pulse comes back almost exactly the same. Not louder, not distorted, repeated. The waveform spikes under the static for a split second, then disappears again. On replay, the pattern holds. The spacing is what makes it wrong. Turbulence should drift, break apart, but this keeps landing in nearly identical intervals, like the atmosphere is holding shape around it. Then the recording goes quiet for a moment. Just static. And then the pulse returns again. That is when the explanations start changing around it. References tied to the clip stop matching earlier versions. Files disappear. Labels come back changed. The sound stays identical. The explanations around it do not. And once that happens, the recording stops feeling accidental.
Look, it's aligning.
It starts feeling
We have
controlled.
stabilization at 40 hertz. Wait, it's
Engineers
breaking up
start
again.
stripping the recording apart layer by layer. Low frequencies are isolated first. Static drops away from the screen. The pulses remain. New bands begin locking into place across the graphs. Not drifting, not spreading, repeating. Titan's atmosphere carries sound farther than Earth ever could. Dense enough to distort it, stretch it, but still atmospheric. What appears on the screens does not look atmospheric anymore. The cleaned audio starts resembling resonance. And resonance needs structure. A chamber, a boundary, something containing pressure. But this came from open atmosphere. For a moment, nobody says anything. Open atmosphere. Then the next filter finishes processing. The intervals sharpen instead of breaking
Earth's
apart.
acoustics quickly dampen the sound.
What first sounded buried inside descent noise now resembles engineered pressure spacing, too organized to belong to turbulence. The more distortion analysts remove, the less natural the recording becomes. That is when attention shifts away from Titan itself. Maybe the probe is malfunctioning. Maybe vibration inside the equipment is bleeding into the recording. The explanation shifts again, this time toward the probe itself. But the contradiction keeps surviving the cleanup. And now, the environment itself starts looking wrong. The new explanation almost fixes everything. Parachutes deploy above the probe as it falls through layer after layer of hydrocarbon haze. Huygens shook hard, descending through Titan's haze. Cables vibrated, panels flexed. Mechanical noise inside the craft suddenly becomes the explanation everyone wants. Researchers begin overlaying vibration telemetry directly on top of the recording. The graphs begin aligning almost perfectly. One pulse, one vibration spike, another pulse, another spike, For the first time, the pattern starts making sense again. Relief slips back into the analysis because the problem no longer belongs to Titan, it belongs to machinery. And machinery fails in understandable ways. With every adjustment, the overlap tightens. Audio pulses move against the mechanical data until the patterns nearly sit on top of each other. Nearly synchronized graphs drift across the screens by fractions of a second. Almost. Because one interval keeps drifting outside the telemetry match. Just one. If the probe caused the sound, the frequencies should align completely. But every time the vibration model stabilizes, a repeating gap drifts slightly away from it, then returns again later. Small enough to dismiss. Except the entire explanation now depends on that mismatch disappearing. And it never fully does. The correction system starts breaking its own explanation. The probe settles as the descent continues. The probe stops shaking as violently. Movement across the monitor starts smoothing out. For a few moments, the data finally looks controlled. But the pulses keep changing anyway. The pulse keeps drifting away from Huygens telemetry. Comparison screens run side by side as both systems begin separating. Stable telemetry on one side, repeating intervals on the other. At first, the timing slips by fractions. Then the gap stops correcting itself. The lines stop locking together completely. Two graphs drift apart across the screens, while the recording continues underneath. That is the moment the mechanical explanation dies. If probe vibration caused the sound, stable movement should stabilize the intervals too. Instead, the opposite happens. The cleaner the telemetry becomes, the more independent the pulses appear. The anomaly survives multiple altitude changes, different pressure layers, even parts of the descent where the craft behaves normally again. Now there is no verified source left inside the system. The instruments are still functioning correctly. The recording remains measurable. Every process still works. Only the explanation holding it together collapses. And once the correction removes the last stable explanation, attention starts moving somewhere even less reliable. The missing references, the altered archive records, the versions that no longer match each other at all. Broken archive links still reopen pieces of the recording. Fragments survive on old mirrors, clipped uploads, partial reconstructions. The pulse remains identical each time it returns. Low, repeating, measurable. Titan's only recorded descent still resists explanation. Researchers keep rebuilding the environment around it anyway. Simulated pressure chambers, recreated acoustic models, digital Titan atmospheres adjusted again and again to make the sound fit. None of them fail the same way twice. One simulation wipes out the spacing completely. Another reproduces part of the resonance but destroys the timing. A third briefly appears correct, then collapses as soon as the final pressure layers are added. Every improved model collapses faster than the last. Because if Titan acoustics explain the recording, the simulation should eventually reproduce it. Instead, the models become less stable. The closer the models move toward completion, the faster the signal slips outside them again. And slowly, the recording stops sounding mysterious for a different reason. Not because something was hiding inside Titan. Into proof that the recording was always real while human interpretation remained unstable around it. Human beings evolved hearing Earth, Earth pressure, Earth air, Earth acoustics. Then one day, humanity listened to another world.
Black screen.
The pulse plays again by itself.
And after everything else disappeared around it, that sound still remained.